Susan Martinez stood in the marble foyer of the Ashford estate in Scarsdale, New York, her hand instinctively resting on her barely visible baby bump beneath her cotton dress. The October afternoon light filtered through the towering windows, casting long shadows across the imported Italian tile. At 28, she'd spent 3 years navigating the treacherous waters of this family, but today felt different, heavier, more suffocating than usual. Eleanor Ashford descended the curved staircase with the practiced grace of old money, her Chanel suit immaculate, her silver hair pulled into a tight chignon that accentuated her sharp cheekbones. "Susan, darling," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth, "I wasn't expecting you until dinner." "Daniel asked me to pick up some documents from his office," Susan replied, maintaining her composure despite the familiar knot forming in her stomach. After years of Eleanor's passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled criticism, Susan had learned to armor herself with politeness. Eleanor's eyes flickered to Susan's midsection, and her lips tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, the pregnancy. We really must discuss that." She gestured toward the study. "Come, we need to talk privately." Susan hesitated. Daniel, her husband, was in Manhattan meeting with investors for his tech startup, a venture his mother had reluctantly funded after he'd threatened to cut ties completely. Their marriage had been a battlefield from the start, with Eleanor viewing Susan as an unsuitable match for her only son. Susan's middle-class upbringing in Queens, her public school education, her Puerto Rican heritage, none of it fit Eleanor's vision of the perfect daughter-in-law. "I really should get back," Susan began, but Eleanor was already walking toward the study, expecting to be followed. The study smelled of leather and expensive cigars, remnants of Daniel's late father, whose fortune had built this empire. Eleanor settled into the wingback chair behind the mahogany desk, a power move Susan recognized immediately. "Sit," Eleanor commanded, and Susan reluctantly took the smaller chair opposite her. "I've been patient," Eleanor began, her fingers steepled beneath her chin. "I've tolerated this marriage, tolerated your presence in my son's life, but this," she gestured vaguely toward Susan's stomach, "this is too much." Susan's heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm sorry. Don't play naive, it doesn't suit you." Eleanor leaned forward, her blue eyes cold as winter frost. "You trapped him with this pregnancy. Daniel had plans, real plans. Harvard Business School next year, taking over the family investments. Now you've shackled him to domestic responsibilities he never wanted." The accusation hit Susan like a physical blow. "Daniel and I planned this pregnancy together. He's excited about becoming a father." "He's confused," Eleanor interrupted sharply. "You've manipulated him since the day you met. I saw through you immediately, a gold digger from Queens who saw her meal ticket and grabbed it with both hands." Her voice dripped with contempt, each word carefully chosen to wound. Susan stood, her hands trembling. "I won't listen to this. Daniel loves me. We love each other." "Love," Eleanor scoffed, rising from her chair. "You know nothing about love. You know about opportunity and exploitation. I've watched you isolate him from his real family, from his responsibilities, from his potential." She moved around the desk, her movements predatory. "I won't let you destroy everything his father and I built. I won't let some opportunistic nobody produce an heir to the Ashford fortune." "An heir?" Susan's voice cracked. "This is your grandchild we're talking about. That thing inside you is a mistake that needs to be corrected." Eleanor's mask had fully slipped now, revealing the venom underneath. "I'm prepared to offer you $2 million. You'll terminate the pregnancy, divorce Daniel quietly, and disappear from our lives. Non-negotiable." The room spun. Susan gripped the back of the chair for support, the implications of Eleanor's words crashing over her like waves. "You're offering me money to abort my baby and leave your son." "Our son," Eleanor corrected icily. "And yes, $2 million is more than generous for someone of your background. Take it and go back to whatever bridge you crawled out from under." Something inside Susan snapped. The months of subtle insults, the years of being made to feel inferior, the constant undermining of her marriage, it all crystallized into white-hot fury. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not. This baby is wanted and loved. Daniel will hear about this conversation. And when he does what?" Eleanor stepped closer, invading Susan's space. "You'll run crying to him? Paint me as the villain? Daniel may be temporarily blinded by whatever spell you've cast, but blood is thicker than water. He'll choose family. He always does." Susan turned toward the door, desperate to escape the toxic atmosphere. "We'll see about that. She made it 3 steps into the hallway before Eleanor's hand closed around her upper arm, spinning her back. "You're not leaving until we settle this," Eleanor hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into Susan's skin. "Let go of me." Susan yanked her arm free, stumbling backward. Her heel caught on the ornamental rug at the top of the grand staircase, the same staircase Eleanor had descended so gracefully minutes before. Susan felt herself tilting, her center of gravity shifting dangerously backward. In that frozen moment, Eleanor's face showed something that would haunt Susan forever. Not horror, not concern, but calculation. Instead of reaching out to steady her, Eleanor's hand moved forward, not to grab, but to push. The shove was quick, almost subtle, but unmistakable. Susan's arms windmilled frantically as she fell backward down the stairs, her body tumbling over polished wood, each impact sending shockwaves of pain through her spine, her shoulders, her head. She heard herself screaming, heard the sickening thuds of her body against unforgiving surfaces. Somewhere above, Eleanor stood motionless, watching. Susan's world went black before she reached the bottom. Susan regained consciousness to the antiseptic smell of a hospital and the steady beep of monitors. Her entire body throbbed with pain, her right arm in a cast, her head bandaged, bruises blooming across every inch of skin. But worse than any physical pain was the immediate, primal fear that clutched her heart. The baby. "You're awake." Daniel's voice came from beside the bed, thick with exhaustion and worry. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, his tie loosened, dark circles under his hazel eyes. "Thank God, Susan. You scared the hell out of me." "The baby," Susan croaked, her throat raw. "Daniel, is the baby—" "The baby's okay," he said quickly, taking her uninjured hand. "Stable. You're 18 weeks, so there's still risk, but the doctors are cautiously optimistic. They've been monitoring constantly." His voice cracked. "You fell down the stairs at the estate. Mom called 911 immediately. She said you'd been picking up documents and must have tripped." Susan's blood ran cold. Eleanor's version of events was already in motion, already poisoning the narrative. "Daniel, I didn't trip. She pushed me." The words hung in the air between them. Daniel's expression shifted from relief to confusion to something harder to read. "What?" "Your mother pushed me down the stairs. She offered me $2 million to abort the baby and leave you. When I refused and tried to leave, she grabbed me, and when I pulled away, she pushed me." Susan's voice was gaining strength despite the pain. "She wanted me to lose the baby, Daniel. She wanted to get rid of both of us." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The view showed Greenwich Avenue below, cars and pedestrians moving through their normal lives while Susan's world collapsed. "Susan, that's insane. My mother wouldn't, she couldn't, she did." Susan struggled to sit up, ignoring her body's protests. "She called me a gold digger, said I trapped you, said the baby was a mistake that needed to be corrected. I have bruises on my arm where she grabbed me. She tried to lift her hospital gown with her good hand, revealing the purple finger-shaped marks on her upper arm." Daniel's jaw clenched, but doubt still clouded his features. "There has to be another explanation. Maybe she tried to grab you to stop you from falling." "She pushed me, Daniel." Susan's voice rose, causing monitors to beep more insistently. "I felt her hand on my back. I saw her face. She wanted this to happen. She wants me gone and our baby gone because we don't fit into her perfect vision of the Ashford legacy." A nurse entered, alerted by the monitor changes. "Mrs. Ashford, you need to stay calm. Your blood pressure is spiking, which isn't good for you or the baby." She shot Daniel a meaningful look. "Perhaps Mr. Ashford should let you rest." "No," Susan insisted. "Daniel, please. You have to believe me. Your mother is dangerous. She's been trying to drive us apart since we got married, and now she's escalated to violence. If you don't believe me, if you take her side, I don't know what I'll do." Daniel looked torn, caught between the woman he'd married and the mother who'd raised him. "I need to talk to her, hear her side. There's been misunderstanding before." "This isn't a misunderstanding." Tears burned Susan's eyes, frustration and fear mixing into something overwhelming. "She tried to kill our baby. She tried to hurt me. And you're talking about hearing her side." "I'm trying to be rational," Daniel said defensively. "You've been through trauma. Sometimes memory after an accident isn't reliable. Get out." Susan's voice was quiet but deadly serious. "If you're going to doubt me, if you're going to defend her, get out of this room right now." Daniel froze, staring at his wife's battered face. "Susan, out." She turned her face away. toward the bland hospital wall. Go ask your mother her version. Go let her manipulate you like she always does. But don't come back until you're ready to choose between us, because I'm done competing with her for my own husband's loyalty. The silence stretched for a full minute before Susan heard Daniel's footsteps retreating, heard the door close softly behind him. Only then did she let the tears fall, let the enormity of her situation crash over her. She was injured, vulnerable, her baby's life hanging in the balance, and the one person who should have stood by her unquestioningly had just walked out, prioritizing his mother's feelings over his wife's trauma. The next 3 days passed in a blur of medical tests, fetal monitoring, and crushing loneliness. Daniel returned, but the tension between them was palpable. He claimed to have confronted Eleanor, who had been deeply upset by Susan's accusations, and insisted she'd only tried to grab Susan to prevent her fall. The physical evidence, the finger-shaped bruises on Susan's arm, Eleanor explained, as her desperate attempt to catch Susan before she tumbled down the stairs. It was a plausible counter-narrative, one that played into existing family dynamics. Eleanor was the wealthy matriarch, respected in Scarsdale society, a philanthropist whose name appeared on hospital wings and museum plaques. Susan was the outsider, the girl from Queens, who'd married above her station. In any he said, she said scenario, Eleanor held all the cards: money, social standing, reputation. On the 4th day, Dr. Patricia Morrison, a no-nonsense obstetrician in her 50s, came to discuss Susan's discharge. "You've been incredibly lucky," she said, reviewing the charts. "The baby's heartbeat is strong. No signs of placental abruption or other complications. You'll need complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks, regular monitoring, and absolutely no stress." She looked meaningfully at Susan over her reading glasses. "I mean that. Stress is dangerous for both of you right now." "I understand," Susan said quietly. After Dr. Morrison left, Susan lay staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Going back to the apartment she shared with Daniel meant accepting his mother's version of events, meant living with the knowledge that her husband doubted her, meant waiting for Eleanor's next move, because there would be a next move. Susan was certain of that. Eleanor Ashford didn't accept defeat, and Susan's continued pregnancy was a living symbol of that defeat. The answer came from an unexpected source. Maria Martinez, Susan's mother, arrived that afternoon carrying a worn duffel bag and an expression of fierce determination. At 60, Maria was compact and strong, her hands rough from years working as a housekeeper, ironically, for families not unlike the Ashfords. She took one look at her daughter's face and pulled her into a careful embrace. "Mija," she whispered, "I came as soon as I could get away. Tell me everything." Susan did, and unlike Daniel, Maria believed her instantly. "That woman," Maria said, her accent thickening with anger. "I knew she was poison. I told you at the wedding, remember? I saw how she looked at you, like you were dirt on her expensive shoes." "Mama, what am I going to do?" Susan's voice broke. "Daniel doesn't believe me. If I stay, she'll try again. I know she will, but if I leave, I have nothing. No job, no money, nowhere to go. And she'll use it against me, paint me as unstable, try to take custody of the baby when it's born." Maria was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she said, "Your cousin Lucia in Phoenix, remember?" Susan frowned. "Lucia, who married the lawyer?" "Si, Miguel Reyes. He specializes in family law, divorce, custody cases. Smart man, good man." Maria pulled out her phone. "I'm going to call her. You need legal advice, Mija, and you need it from someone who won't be intimidated by Ashford money." The plan took shape over the next 24 hours. Miguel Reyes agreed to consult pro bono as a family favor. His advice was blunt. Document everything. Get a restraining order against Eleanor if possible, and under no circumstances return to any location where Eleanor had access to her. He also recommended something Susan hadn't considered: hiring a private investigator. "Women like Eleanor Ashford don't suddenly become violent," Miguel explained via video call, his kind face filling Susan's phone screen. "If she's capable of pushing you downstairs, there's likely a history of bad behavior. Employees she's mistreated, other family members she's abused. We need to build a pattern. And Susan, get your own doctor, one Eleanor doesn't have any connection to. Make sure all your medical records note that you reported being pushed, not that you fell accidentally." That last part hit Susan hard. Dr. Morrison, while compassionate, worked at Greenwich Hospital, where the Ashford name was on the cardiac wing. The potential for conflict of interest was real. Miguel recommended a colleague in Westchester who had no Ashford connections. Susan's discharge from the hospital was tense. Daniel insisted she come back to their apartment in Manhattan, a Upper West Side two-bedroom his mother had purchased for them as a wedding gift, a fact Eleanor reminded them of constantly. Susan agreed on one condition. Eleanor was not allowed to visit or contact her in any way. Daniel reluctantly agreed, though Susan could see the conflict in his eyes. The apartment felt like a prison. Susan spent her days in bed as ordered, staring at the ceiling, feeling their baby move for the first time. Little flutters that filled her with equal parts joy and terror. Daniel went to work, came home and maintained a careful distance, like Susan was a stranger rather than his wife. They barely spoke beyond necessary exchanges about doctor's appointments and meals. The private investigator Miguel recommended was named Rachel Stein, a former NYPD detective who now specialized in domestic cases. She arrived on a Tuesday morning while Daniel was at work, a compact woman in her 40s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Tell me everything," she said, setting up a recording device with Susan's permission. "Every interaction with Eleanor Ashford, every red flag, every witness who might corroborate your story." Susan talked for 3 hours, dredging up memories she'd tried to bury. The time Eleanor had accidentally spilled red wine on Susan's dress at a family dinner. The Christmas when she'd given Daniel's ex-girlfriend, a woman named Brittany from a prominent Connecticut family, a seat at the main table while relegating Susan to the children's table. The countless subtle digs about Susan's education, her family, her career as a graphic designer. The way Eleanor had tried to sabotage their wedding, claiming Susan's family wasn't appropriate for the venue she'd selected. "What about Daniel's father?" Rachel asked. "What was their marriage like?" Susan paused. "He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. Daniel doesn't talk about him much, but I get the sense it wasn't a warm marriage. Very traditional, very cold. Eleanor made all the decisions about Daniel's life, his schools, his activities, his friends." Rachel made notes. "Classic, controlling personality. I'm going to dig into Eleanor's background, employment history of household staff, social connections, any legal issues. I'm also going to canvass the neighborhood, see if any of those mansion-sized homes have security cameras that might have caught something." She met Susan's eyes. "I believe you, but belief isn't enough. We need evidence that will stand up in court if this goes to custody battle or criminal charges." Over the next 3 weeks, Rachel worked quietly but thoroughly. She discovered that Eleanor had gone through 7 housekeepers in 3 years, all of whom had left abruptly, none willing to provide references. She found a former driver who, after some persuasion, admitted Eleanor had physically struck him during an argument about routing. She uncovered sealed court documents from Daniel's childhood, indicating a teacher had once reported concerns about bruising, though nothing came of it. Most importantly, she found a neighbor, Mrs. Judith Brennan, an elderly widow who lived in the estate adjacent to the Ashfords. Mrs. Brennan had been in her garden that October afternoon and had seen part of the incident through the Ashfords' front windows. "I saw them arguing at the top of the stairs," she told Rachel, her statement recorded and notarized. "The older woman, Eleanor, she definitely pushed the younger one. It wasn't a stumble. It was deliberate." When Rachel presented this evidence to Susan, along with a 30-page report detailing Eleanor's pattern of abusive behavior, Susan felt vindication and terror in equal measure. "This is enough to press charges," Rachel said. "Assault with intent to cause harm to a pregnant woman. That's serious. Could be up to 15 years if prosecuted fully." Susan's hand went to her growing belly, now visible at 22 weeks. "If I press charges, this becomes public. It becomes a court battle with unlimited resources on her side. The stress could harm your baby," Rachel finished. "I know, but doing nothing also has risks. Eleanor is still out there, still angry, still feeling like you're a threat to her control over Daniel. The question isn't whether she'll try something again, it's when." That night, Susan showed Daniel the report. She watched his face as he read through page after page of evidence, witness statements, employment records, documentation of Eleanor's decades-long pattern of intimidation and violence. The color drained from his face. His hands trembled. "This can't be real," he whispered. "This is my mother." "This is your mother," Susan agreed quietly. "And this is who she's always been. You just didn't want to see it because seeing it would mean acknowledging that your entire childhood was built on control and manipulation." Daniel stood abruptly, pacing to the window overlooking Central Park. The November evening was dark, the park's trees skeletal against the city lights. "She used to," he started, then stopped. "When I was little, if I disappointed her, she'd lock me in the basement. Tell me I wasn't a real Ashford, that I was worthless. Dad never stopped her. He just looked away." His voice cracked. "I thought that was normal. Thought every family was like that." Susan's heart broke for him. "Daniel, I should have believed you immediately," he continued, turning to face her. "When you said she pushed you, every instinct should have been to protect you and our baby, but instead I protected her. I chose her comfort over your safety. How do I—" He pressed his palms against his eyes. "How do I come back from that?" Susan didn't have an answer. The damage to their marriage was real and deep, but she saw something in Daniel's face she'd never seen before. Genuine remorse, and maybe the first cracks in the foundation Eleanor had built around his psyche. "We need to decide what happens next," Susan said finally. "Rachel says we have enough to press charges, but that means a trial, media attention, years of legal battle, or what? Or we disappear." Susan laid out the alternative plan she and Rachel had discussed. "We take what money we have that isn't connected to your mother. We move somewhere she can't find us easily, maybe Phoenix near my cousin. You find work that isn't funded by Ashford money. We build a life on our own terms, and if she comes after us for custody or anything else, we have this evidence as leverage." "That's running," Daniel said. "That's surviving," Susan corrected. "I won't raise our child in Eleanor's shadow. I won't spend the next 18 years looking over my shoulder, wondering when she'll strike again. And I can't stay married to someone who isn't willing to put this family, our family, first." The ultimatum was clear. Daniel had to choose, finally and completely, between the family of his birth and the family he was creating. Susan watched him war with himself, saw the lifelong conditioning battling against the evidence in his hands and the battered woman carrying his child. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, we go to Phoenix, we start over. But Susan, I need you to know, I'm done with her. Not just physically, but emotionally. I'm done letting her control my life, our life. Whatever it takes to prove that to you, I'll do it." It was a start. Maybe not enough to repair everything that had been broken, but a start. The move to Phoenix happened quickly. Daniel liquidated the small investment account his father had left him directly, the one piece of inheritance Eleanor couldn't access or control, giving them enough to secure an apartment and cover expenses for 6 months. He notified his mother via lawyer letter that he was cutting all financial and personal ties, and that any attempt to contact Susan or their child would result in criminal charges and the release of Rachel's investigative report to the press. Eleanor's response was predictable. Rage, threats, claims that Daniel was mentally unstable and under Susan's spell. She hired lawyers to challenge his access to even the small inheritance from his father, arguing he was acting against his own interests. But Miguel Reyes, now officially representing them, met every legal maneuver with one of his own. The leverage of the assault evidence and witness testimony kept Eleanor at bay, for now. Phoenix in December was a revelation. Warm sun, open skies, and blessed distance from Scarsdale's suffocating social hierarchies. Susan's cousin Lucia and her husband Miguel welcomed them with open arms, helping them find a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Tempe. It wasn't the Upper West Side, but it felt like freedom. Daniel found work at a small tech startup using his programming skills and business acumen. The salary was a fraction of what he'd been positioned to earn in New York, but he threw himself into the work with surprising enthusiasm. Susan, cleared by her new obstetrician to resume light activity, began freelancing as a graphic designer again, work she'd abandoned under Eleanor's subtle pressure to focus on being a proper wife. Therapy became a non-negotiable part of their weekly routine. Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, a trauma specialist Miguel recommended, worked with them both individually and as a couple. "What you're dealing with," he explained in one session, "is decades of psychological abuse compounded by physical violence and betrayal. Healing from that doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, and there will be setbacks." The setbacks were real. Daniel had nightmares about his mother, would wake up sweating and disoriented. He struggled with guilt, over doubting Susan, over the years he'd enabled Eleanor's behavior, over the childhood he realized had been stolen from him. Susan, meanwhile, dealt with hypervigilance and anxiety. Every unknown number made her jump. Every car that seemed to follow them too long triggered panic attacks. But there were victories, too. Their daughter was born in March, healthy and perfect, with Daniel's eyes and Susan's dark hair. They named her Sophia Elena, Sophia for Daniel's grandmother, who had died when he was young and who he remembered as the one truly kind person in his childhood, Elena for Susan's abuela, who had helped raise her. The name carried history but wasn't bound by it, much like the life they were building. Eleanor sent a lawyer's letter demanding visitation rights, claiming grandparent privileges under New York law. Miguel countered with evidence that Eleanor posed a danger to the child and that Arizona had different statutes. The legal volley continued, but from a distance that felt safer than the immediate threat they'd escaped. 6 months after Sophia's birth, sitting in their small apartment while their daughter slept in her bassinet, Daniel said something that marked a turning point. "I'm grateful." Susan looked up from her laptop where she'd been working on a logo design. "For what?" "For you refusing to accept her version of normal, for fighting back, for giving me the chance to be a better person than she raised me to be." He reached over and took Susan's hand. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness for how I handled things. I know it'll take years to rebuild the trust I destroyed, but I'm grateful you're letting me try." Susan squeezed his hand. "I'm not there yet," she admitted. "Some days I still feel the anger of you walking out of that hospital room, of you doubting me, but I see you trying. I see you choosing differently now. That matters." "It'll matter every day for the rest of my life," Daniel promised. Her power came from silence. From no one questioning, no one pushing back. "We're not going to be silent. Whatever Sophia faces in life, she'll know her parents fought for her. She'll know she doesn't owe anyone her autonomy or safety, no matter how much money or power they have." Rachel called in September with an update. One of Eleanor's former housekeepers had come forward with allegations of physical abuse spanning years, pushed downstairs, struck with objects, threatened with deportation. The woman was filing a civil suit and had agreed to share her story publicly. Other staff members were following suit, emboldened by the first woman's bravery. "It's unraveling," Rachel said. "Eleanor's carefully constructed image is cracking. The Scarsdale community is starting to whisper. Some of her charity board positions are being reconsidered. She's still rich and still powerful, but she's no longer untouchable." Susan felt no satisfaction in Eleanor's downfall, only relief that the pattern was finally being exposed. Other women, other victims, were getting their voices heard. That mattered more than revenge ever could. Daniel began writing letters to Sophia, letters she'd read when she was older. "Dear Sophia," one began, "today you smiled for the first time when your mum sang to you. I want you to know that the world tried to make your mother small, tried to silence her, tried to punish her for not fitting into someone else's idea of who she should be. But she refused. She fought back, not with cruelty, but with truth. That's the legacy I hope you inherit. Not money or status, but the courage to speak your truth, even when powerful people want you silent." A year after leaving New York, Susan and Daniel sat in Miguel's office, finalizing the paperwork for a permanent restraining order against Eleanor. The evidence, witness testimony, medical records, the pattern of abuse, was overwhelming. The judge had granted it without hesitation. "She'll appeal," Miguel warned. "Women like Eleanor don't accept boundaries easily." "Let her appeal," Susan said. "We're not running anymore. We're just living our lives. And if she can't accept that, it's her problem, not ours." Walking out of the courthouse into Phoenix sunshine, Daniel carrying Sophia in her carrier, Susan felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace, not the absence of conflict. Eleanor's legal challenges would likely continue for years, but the presence of agency. She'd been pushed down the stairs, literally and metaphorically, but she'd climbed back up on her own terms. That night, they celebrated with takeout pizza and ice cream, Sophia giggling in her high chair as Daniel made silly faces. It was ordinary, unglamorous, and infinitely precious. Susan looked around their modest apartment, the mismatched furniture, the second-hand crib, the graphic design prints she'd framed from her own work, and felt wealthy in ways Eleanor Ashford would never understand. "To new beginnings," Daniel said, raising his soda can in a toast. "To speaking truth," Susan countered. "To family," they said together, clinking their cans as Sophia squealed with delight. The past had tried to destroy them. Instead, it had revealed what mattered. Not the money or prestige or perfect facade, but the messy, difficult, beautiful work of choosing each other every day. Choosing truth over comfort, choosing growth over control, choosing love that was earned, not demanded. Eleanor Ashford had pushed Susan down the stairs expecting her to break. Instead, Susan had learned to fly, and that was the ending no one, least of all Eleanor, had imagined. Character count, 28,047 characters. This story follows Susan and Daniel's journey from violence and betrayal through accountability and rebuilding. Set in wealthy Scarsdale and eventually Phoenix, it explores the realistic consequences of domestic abuse, the complexity of family loyalty, and the courage required to break generational patterns of control. The narrative focuses on human resilience, the power of documentation and legal protection, and the difficult but necessary work of choosing new patterns over inherited trauma.